Hi, this is international psychic medium Susan Schueler. Welcome to my show, Midlife Conversations. Today, joining us on our show is Kelly Price. Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, today's topic is not a joyous one, but I think it's one that needs to be discussed. Today, we will be talking about sudden infant death syndrome. And unfortunately, this is something Kelly knows far too much about because she lost her daughter this way. So, Kelly, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I honestly, I can't even imagine. As I've said in some of my other shows, when parents lose a child, it is like joining the club that nobody wants to belong to. And there's a pain, I can't imagine anything more tragic. So if we can go before the birth of Bailey, though, what were you doing in your life? What was going on?
So I had my daughter very young. So I was only 19 when I had my daughter. So I was still in I thought I was an adult situation, but I wasn't. I graduated high school, and then 3 days after I graduated high school, I left for the Army. So I was in the Army for 7 years. And I was away, and then I was home. I was in the National Guard. So at the time that I had gotten pregnant with Bailey, I was still in the Army National Guard. So I still lived at home. I worked at the Best Western. I was a front desk manager, worked all the time. So between that and being in the Army, I was very busy. My life was kind of all over the place. It was, let's move every 9 months and bounce from this house to that house. So I had actually lived with my grandmother when I got pregnant, or I think it's kind of funny how it happened because I don't know when I got pregnant with her because I didn't know that I was pregnant until I was 6.5 months.
Oh my God.
So yeah, it was very ironic. I never missed a period. All of a sudden I started getting fat and I was like, what is this? And why do I have this movement in my belly? So it was a very strange situation.
That's so interesting. And Kelly, you hear situations like this, and not just from young women. I've heard situations like this from older women who are supposed to kind of understand their bodies better. But things like that do happen.
They do. And it's like people say, how could you go 9 months and not know? Oh, I understand. I mean, thank God I started showing because I don't know if I would have known otherwise. So that was a red flag.
Wow. What a shock. So now, were you married at the time?
I was not married.
Okay. So this wasn't something that was planned. Clearly, you didn't even know you were pregnant. Okay. So now
it was
when she stepped forward into the world, can you tell us a little bit about baby Bailey?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So she was only here for a short 3 months and 4 days, but she was the best baby. And I don't even know how to describe it without sounding like that mom, but she was the best baby. She started sleeping through the night at 3 weeks. She never cried. She had the personality of a grown adult. I mean, her favorite song, for example, was the Tootsie Roll. And as soon as the Tootsie Roll came on, she'd be flailing, her arms are kicking, she's laughing. I mean, she was just the happiest baby. She had the biggest, brightest eyes and her smile. Her and I it was always her and I, she went to work with me. She went everywhere with me. A good example of our relationship is my mom would watch her sometimes because I had to share. So my mom would watch her sometimes and I would come home and she would be in her bouncer chair. And as soon as she heard my voice, she would just start cranking her head back and laughing. Like she knew mom's here. She was just a very intuitive little girl. That's the best way that I can put it.
And where did you come up with the name Bailey? I have to ask that. Such a beautiful name.
It's very strange how I came up with it. So her name was Bailey Elizabeth. Elizabeth is my best friend's middle name. And Bailey, for some reason, when I found out I was pregnant and they told me it was a girl, I just said Bailey. It was very strange how it all worked out. When I had Bailey, it was like I knew what she was going to look like. So there was no surprise when she came out. I knew what her personality was going to be. It was very strange. So Bailey just always stuck to me. And her spelling of it was Bailee, because her father lived in the city and he said he didn't want his daughter being named after a street in the hood. So
okay, and I want to point out here, Kelly's from the Buffalo, New York area, and there is a Bailey Avenue. You're right.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, so it was spelled it differently.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, now to move forward into a day I'm sure you would love to forget. I just want to ask you if you could tell our viewers, our listeners, a little bit about what happened on the day that you did find her. I think you said you found her in the morning. So explain the best way you can.
Yeah, so unfortunately I will never forget it. And it is like it was yesterday. It was Bailey, like I said, she slept through the night. So it wasn't weird that she didn't wake up throughout the night. What was weird to me that morning, Bailey always woke up early and she would not cry. She would not do anything. She would sit in her crib and she would kind of just just make noises.
Right.
And that's how I woke up every morning, not crying, not anything, just those little happy bird chips, I call them.
Oh.
Bird chirps. That morning I woke up and I had a monitor in my bedroom that had lights on. So it would light up when there was noise. And I looked over at it and it was nothing. There was absolutely no lights on it. And I looked at the clock and it was 7:02. And I was like, well, that's weird because Bailey's normally up by now. Like, I can't believe I slept in this long. I walked into her room and Bailey always slept with a blanket and I always kept it tucked in around her waist. And she always slept with her hands up next to her head. And when I had walked into the room, it was like somebody had picked up the blanket and laid it over her from head to foot. And her hands were down. And I seen them sticking out of the blanket and her fingers were purple. And I had pulled the blanket down and I just screamed. She was purple. She was big, like bloated. She had spit up that it looked like spit up had come out of her mouth and her nose. And she was just laying there. The only thing that I knew,
or was she on her back?
was on her back.
Okay.
I always had her sleep on her back.
Wow.
I would try to sleep her on her side and she would just roll over onto her back. So I gave up on that about 4 or 5 weeks prior. When I found her, the only thing, I don't know why I did this, but I ran outside screaming for somebody to help me.
Of course,
that
that makes perfect sense, actually.
Right. I didn't know what else to do. So there was a gentleman outside he was visiting his father across the street and he was outside and I just started screaming, Bailey's dead, Bailey's dead. And he had called 911. And I remember going back upstairs and saying, I'm going to call 911 myself. And I fell up every single stair. Like I just kept falling. It felt like it took me a year to get back up to her.
Right.
And when I had got up there, by then the first officer was a minute or two behind me.
Oh, wow.
And that's when they all came rushing in.
Wow. Now, with sudden infant death, and I'm so sorry that you went through that, with sudden infant death, I mean, even in this day and age where we have the technology that we do, this is still, when you do research on it, it's just like it's unexplainable. They really don't know why it happens. But I'm just going to read a little bit about this because I just checked this out on the Mayo Clinic. Because it even says right there, it's like some of the causes are unknown. Most of them are. There's certain things that might contribute into it, but even then it's not like across the board, but they say like brain defects, low birth weight, possibly like a respiratory issue, like if a child had just had a cold. The thing I found interesting is boys have they're at a higher risk than girls are. The age now, you saying she was 3 months at this time?
It was 3 months and 4 days.
Yeah, because they're saying between 2 months and 4 months, I guess, although it can happen up to a year. I've never heard of that, but it can, and I didn't know that. The race of a child, I guess non-white children have a higher chance of it. Family history, this is the part that would terrify me, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. It says babies who have siblings who have passed from this, or even cousins are at a higher risk. And then they say if a baby's a preemie, and she wasn't a premature baby, was she?
Oh, she was 7 pounds, 5 ounces.
Yeah, I mean, so you've got all of those things and the fact that you had her sleeping on her back. And I had one of my college roommates lost her firstborn to sudden infant death. And it happened when they were running errands and the baby was in the baby seat in the back. And so, I mean, it's
Yes,
not even that it has to happen. So if you think of running errands, it's not like you're in a deep sleep. So you hear things like this. It's like, yeah, having a child die from sudden infant death syndrome, this is life altering. So if I can ask you, how did this change your life? How did this change the way that you lived your life?
this changed me in a way that is so hard for me to describe. When I had Bailey, I knew sudden infant death was a real thing. I never thought it would happen to me.
Of course.
I never thought it would happen to my daughter.
Right.
For a while, and for a long while, after my daughter passed away, my best friend had a child. I wouldn't even hold the child. If a baby was under 8 months old, I stayed clear. I just looked from a distance and that was it. It's so hard to explain how it changed me. My whole personality changed. Before my daughter, I had a very bad temper. I was a very angry person. My daughter came into my life and showed me how much I didn't know I could love somebody like that. I didn't know that responsibility of another human was so special, and it, in a way, it sent me into a spiral of depression because I felt like I failed as well. I didn't protect my daughter like I was supposed to as a mom. Right. It did take me a while. I was in severe denial. Severe. I mean, I went back to work the day after her funeral. Put me back to work, and I want to work as much as possible. Just put me back to work. I did make a mistake, and I did go AWOL from the Army because I just couldn't even think straight, So I did go AWOL from the Army. They did work with me when I did go back, so I didn't get an dishonorable discharge. I was able to serve out my time.
Which I'm sure they had to understand that. I mean, my gosh.
Yeah, my commands were amazing with the passing of my daughter. They were at the funeral. They were sending me food. They told me I had a life insurance policy I didn't even know I had. Like, things were they were amazing to me. But I was in such a dark place. And after, just the memory of her smiling, and I'm so glad that she laughed and smiled and giggled all the time. It helped me so much. Just those little things.
Was there a turning point for you that allowed you to become less depressed? I mean, because to me, it's like there are, just from my sister who runs Compassionate Friends Group, she's like, there are some parents who they never get out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was diagnosed with PTSD, not from the military, but from the passing of my daughter. But surprisingly enough, and I might be jumping ahead here, obviously, I have another child now. And when my son was born, that's when my denial went away. And that was when it hit me that your daughter is not here anymore. And now you have to do it again. Mm-hmm. And it was not until he turned 1 that my life changed and I found Kelly again.
Okay. Yeah. And so let's talk about your son, Isaiah, a little bit, because like we said, if you've lost a child already, there's a higher chance of losing a child again. Now, like I jokingly was telling you before we started, I don't have any children, but I've always been so paranoid that if I babysit, I'm always like poking at kids and making sure they're breathing and all of that sort of stuff. But how did the fact that this happened to your daughter, how did it affect the way that you approached parenting, having another infant? How did all of that go down?
Yeah. So in the beginning, as soon as I had him, in the hospital, that's when it hit me. The depression sunk in. I remember the day that we were getting discharged from the hospital, the nurse came in and I said, don't send him home with me. And she kind of looked at me. I said, he's just going to die again. And
Oh,
she was like, what are you talking about? Like, so that's when they decided that I would have to have a VNA come into my house a couple times a week because I was in a severe postpartum depression. To this day, my son is going to be 12 years old next month. To this day, I still check on him 3 to 4 times a night.
yeah.
I always have. Now, when he was an infant, I did something that it was almost as bad as, sleeping with a child, because they say that you can roll over onto the child. I put my son next to me. I slept on the couch,
Oh,
and my son slept next to me until he was a year old.
oh my gosh.
He did not sleep on the couch with me. He would sleep in a bouncer chair, which brings me to how you said that you had known somebody who the child passed away in a car seat. It's the same thing. In my mind, he was elevated, so he was going to be okay. In reality, it actually made it worse because their neck is scrunched. So it could cause more complications.
Oh, wow.
But I just thought in my mind, he's going to be elevated and he's going to breathe. So he's going to sleep next to me in the bouncer. And I slept with my hand on his leg
Oh my God.
for 1 straight, just to make sure. And on that night of 3 months and 3 days old, I did not sleep 1 second.
Yeah.
I just watched him all night long.
Right. And it's interesting too, Kelly, because I know you and I know Isaiah, and you are not what I would consider like a helicopter mom. You're really not. I mean, and it's just, you've got a very nice young man who does his own thing and is very responsible. You don't spoon feed that boy, it's just, so it had to be challenging for him to turn out the way he's turning out and you not be a helicopter mom. Cause I would have immediately gravitated towards wanting to be a helicopter mom.
Well, I used to be a helicopter mom, 100%. And I still have some little tendencies. And it's funny that you say that because my brother calls me a helicopter mom, something serious. I mean, I'm a single mom and his father and I have not been together since he was 1. I will say that for the first year of Isaiah's life, if it weren't for his father, I don't know where I would be today. His father really stepped up to the plate. I mean, it was so bad for 3 months. I didn't want to get off the couch. I didn't want to shower. I didn't want to do anything. I remember one time he was like, you need to go to the store. And I'm like, no, you're going to go for me. And he's like, get up and go. So, I mean, really, I will give him credit for that first year. As soon as my son turned 1 year old, it was like it clicked. And I'm like, this is going to be fun. This is going to be my best friend. He's not going to leave me and we're going to have a good time. So it's always been, Isaiah and I, my little pal, and I have him all the time. He's with me 365 days a year. So
like I said to the audience before, he's a great kid. I mean, he's a really mature, very cool, great kid.
Yeah, he's super smart. So he checks me on my facts a lot of times, which I enjoy. That's fine.
Well, being the medium that I am, I do want to get a little woo-woo here right now, because I know there were some stories where you did feel that Bailey was visiting from the other side. So would you just share a few of those stories? Just kind of give us a little bit of information about that.
Sure. So when I had my daughter, I lived in an apartment. And when I had my son, I was still in that same apartment. The apartment was only 3 bedrooms and I was in 1 bedroom. One with my daughter, my brother was in the other. With my son, my mom was in it. So that led Bailey's room to be Isaiah's room, which, like I said, he didn't sleep in there for the first year, but for that reason. But once my son started talking and walking at 10 months old, he was very fast. And I remember before his first birthday, he was probably 11 months or so. He was in his bedroom and he was screaming at somebody. That's mine. That's mine. That's mine. And he was obsessed with fire trucks and trains. And he used to say fire truck bad. I won't say it, but you can imagine that.
We could use our imagination.
Yes. And he was screaming, give me back my truck. Give me back my truck. And I was sitting in the living room and I'm like, who is he talking to? And all of a sudden he goes, Sissy, mine. And I was like, okay. So I walked in there. I said, Zay, who are you talking to, sweetie? Sissy. I'm like, well, who's Sissy? And he pointed at, he had a picture of her on his wall and he pointed at the picture. I said, well, where is she? Bye. I'm like, okay, so she's gone now.
Okay.
Another time in the same apartment, we had a stereo. It was a very old stereo system where it had like the big speakers next to it with the big, sound system. And I would be sitting on the couch looking right at it, watching TV, and the nozzle would turn on the volume and it would start playing music. And I'm like, okay, this is getting a little weird. So I had unplugged it from the speaker. It still turned it on and started playing music. So I was like, okay, Bailey, I see you, baby girl. And as soon as I would say it, it would stop.
Oh my gosh.
My mom witnessed that, I witnessed that, and my son. And then just as another example is recently, this was actually a couple of weeks ago, I was driving to Target and I was just in the car by myself. And I'm like, all right, talking to Bailey, I wish you were here and I wish you could see your brother and I would love to see you guys fighting and wonder what you would be like. Remember how I said her favorite song was the Tootsie Roll? Not 2 minutes after I got done talking to her, did the Tootsie Roll come on the radio? That song is from 1994. So why would it come on the radio? So again, it was like, okay, Bailey, I see you, baby girl.
Oh, see, I love that. And to me, that's like something I think like all of our viewers and listeners need to understand is I mean, you'd think a baby, how's a baby going to do that? But it's spirit. It's not, that was just like her human form at that point, but she's still this little soul and this little spirit. And it's still the same as, an adult, so, and I love the fact children, especially like as Isaiah, as that very young boy, they don't really have it in their brain yet. Like this isn't possible, or this isn't supposed to happen. So a lot of times they have their pretend friends that aren't really pretend, or they will be visited by people who are in spirit. So I love that.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was something I'll never forget. And that did happen a couple of times. So awesome. It was nice.
Yeah. So did you, when you were going through all of this, did you get any kind of help? Did you go see therapists? Did you and I mentioned my sisters and compassionate friends. I mean, were you able to tap into anything like that kind of help? And if you were, did it help?
So the only type of therapy I went to was compassionate friends. I had gone to
if I can just interrupt for a second. Compassionate Friends, for those people who may not know that, is a group specifically made by parents for parents who have lost their children, no matter what age, from baby to older, much older. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah. So I went to Compassionate Friends, and the strangest thing is, a lot of people think, oh, you lost a child, I'm not going to talk about that. I just want to let it be known that anybody who lost a child, they want to talk about their child.
Absolutely.
They want to keep their memory alive. So that was like the most helpful thing for me, because not only did I get to help other people by listening about their children, but I got to talk about my daughter. And even though my daughter was only here for 3 months, those 3 months, she left such an impact on so many people. And I feel like it's so nice to talk about those positive impacts that she had left. So that was the only type of therapy that I had gone to. What I did do is I wrote in a journal, and I wrote a lot of poems. I wrote letters to her. Just every night I would just write a little bit to her. This is my day. Here's how I'm feeling. And here's what you missed, or maybe you didn't miss. I don't know. Who knows if she's here. So that really, it helped me, because I felt like you can't judge yourself. Right. So it was just my communication with my daughter that nobody was going to judge and nobody was going to see.
Right. Yeah. And that's awesome that you say that. And I think that's such an important point, because that's the one thing I noticed. And like I said, I get mediumship from a different standpoint when I work with spirits there and other ones, but almost every single one of the spirit people, when they're communicating with like a parent or somebody who knows their parent, they all say, please share my stories, talk, go back to my house, show pictures with my mom. My mom needs to have stories told about me, stories she might not know. And you're absolutely right. People need to understand that their loved ones, they want to talk. Yes. And I'm sure you probably ran into that, where people were like tiptoeing around you. They were afraid to bring up, because it was going to make you sad. Like you weren't sad.
Exactly.
know?
Yeah, it makes people sad when you feel like you don't want to talk about it.
Right.
Ask them, what was your daughter, what was your child like? What was your brother like? What was your mom like? You know, because it's fun. It's good. It keeps their memory alive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Kelly, I want to thank you so much for being on our show today and just really giving a very heartfelt interview, because I know this topic is a challenging one and you're not alone. There's so many people who lose their children this way. And like you said, it's not something that's really much talked about. It's kind of like that happens to other people. So
Right.
anyway, Kelly, just thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. This was my pleasure.
Okay, I'm so glad you were here. And I would just like to thank our audience members for being here, for our listeners and our viewers. And I would like to leave us with this thought. Although our stories are unique, our experiences are what unites us. And I just want us all to remember that we are all one. And thank you for being on the show. Till next time.